Good evening, and welcome to Cozy Sleep Time. Get comfortable and take a slow breath. Let your body relax more and more. Tonight's story is about the forests. Simply listen or let your mind drift. There is no need to focus. Let the quiet story begin. Forests function as powerful engines of weather, shaping the atmosphere around them in ways that scientists are only beginning to fully understand. Unlike a field of crops or bare soil, a forest actively modifies the air above it, creating conditions that can lead to cloud formation, rainfall, and shifts in local temperature patterns. The process begins with transpiration, the release of water vapor from the leaves of trees. Through tiny pores, called stomata, trees draw water from the soil and release it into the atmosphere. A single mature tree can transpire more than 300 liters of water on a warm day. Multiply that across an entire forest, and the quantity of water entering the atmosphere becomes staggering. A square kilometer of temperate forest can release tens of thousands of liters of water into the air each day during the growing season. This water vapor becomes part of the local atmosphere, increasing humidity and changing the energy balance of the air above the canopy. When enough water vapor accumulates, it can condense into clouds. This means forests are actively contributing to the formation of the very clouds that float above them. In some regions, more than half of the precipitation that falls originates from water that was transpired by local vegetation. The canopy of a forest also affects how energy from the sun is absorbed and distributed. Darker than bare soil or grassland, forest canopies absorb more solar radiation. This absorbed energy drives the evaporation of water from leaves, powering the transpiration process. It also heats the air immediately above the canopy, creating a distinct boundary layer that behaves differently from the air above surrounding landscapes. Wind encounters a forest and slows dramatically. The rough surface created by the tops of trees drags on moving air, reducing wind speed and altering how air flows across the landscape. Air that moves slowly over a forest has more time to pick up moisture, becoming increasingly humid as it travels. This moisture-laden air can then be carried to other areas where it may contribute to precipitation far from the forest that released the water. Forests also release volatile organic compounds into the atmosphere. These compounds, which give forests their distinctive scent, react with other chemicals in the air to form tiny particles. These particles serve as cloud condensation nuclei, the seeds around which cloud droplets form. More particles mean more opportunities for cloud formation, linking the very smell of the forest to the weather it helps create. The feedback loops involved are remarkable. A healthy forest transpires, releasing moisture. That moisture can form clouds. Those clouds can produce rain. That rain sustains the forest, allowing it to continue transpiring. This self-reinforcing cycle helps maintain forest ecosystems in regions where they might otherwise struggle to persist. Different forests act as weather engines with different intensities. A tropical rainforest, with its dense canopy and year-round warmth, is a powerful engine continuously pumping water into the atmosphere. The role of forests as weather engines has implications for how we think about land use. When forests are cleared, this engine is shut off. The moisture that would have entered the atmosphere is no longer available for cloud formation. The cooling effect of transpiration is lost. The landscape becomes drier and warmer, and the feedback loop that sustained the forest is broken. The amount of water that moves through a forest on any given day is difficult to grasp without numbers. A single large oak tree can lift and release more than 400 liters of water during a single growing day. An acre of forest can send thousands of liters of water vapor into the air. Across a large forested region, the total volume of water transpired each day equals that of major rivers flowing across the landscape. This movement of water from soil to atmosphere is a central part of the global water cycle. Trees act as biological pumps, drawing water from deep in the ground and releasing it where it can enter the atmosphere and eventually fall as precipitation elsewhere. Without forests, much of this water would remain in the soil or flow directly to the ocean, bypassing the atmospheric part of the cycle entirely. The depth of tree roots is key to this process. Many forest trees send roots deep into the soil, accessing water unavailable to grasses and crops. This deep water access allows trees to continue transpiring even during dry periods, maintaining the forest's influence on local humidity when other vegetation has stopped. The ability to reach deep water gives forests a persistent effect on local moisture that shallow-rooted plants cannot provide. Forests also influence the water cycle through their physical structure. When rain falls on a forest, the canopy intercepts much of it. Leaves and branches catch the falling water, where some evaporates directly back into the atmosphere. The rest drips slowly to the ground or runs down tree trunks toward the forest floor. This interception reduces the intensity of rainfall reaching the ground, slowing the delivery of water to the soil and reducing the risk of flash flooding after heavy storms. The forest floor itself plays an important role in regulating water movement. Fallen leaves and organic matter create a spongy layer that absorbs water and allows it to infiltrate slowly into the soil. Tree roots create channels that help water move deeper underground, recharging groundwater supplies. A healthy forest soil can absorb rainfall far more effectively than compacted bare soil or agricultural land, where water tends to run off the surface instead of soaking in. Fog is another way forests interact with the water cycle. In coastal and mountain forests, fog often forms as moist air moves through the canopy. The fine droplets of fog collect on leaves and branches, then drip to the ground below. Some forests receive a significant portion of their water from this fog drip, especially during dry seasons when rainfall is scarce. This process, called fog interception, can provide a critical water source for both the forest and the watersheds it protects. The water that forests release does not always fall nearby. Some of it is carried by wind to other regions, where it may contribute to precipitation hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. This means a forest in one region can affect rainfall in another, connecting distant ecosystems through the movement of water in the atmosphere. The Amazon rainforest, for example, contributes moisture that falls as rain across much of South America. The climate inside a forest is strikingly different from the climate outside it. Step from an open field into a dense woodland, and the change is immediate. The air is cooler, the light is dimmer, the wind drops to nearly nothing. These differences are not incidental. They are the direct result of the forest's physical structure interacting with the atmosphere. The most noticeable difference is temperature. The canopy of a forest acts like a living roof, blocking the majority of incoming solar radiation from reaching the ground below. On a sunny day, less than 10% of the sunlight that strikes the top of the canopy may reach the forest floor. This dramatic reduction in solar energy keeps the forest interior cool while surrounding open land heats up. The temperature difference between a forest and an adjacent clearing can be several degrees Celsius on a summer afternoon. At night, the effect reverses. The canopy traps heat that would otherwise radiate into space, keeping the forest interior warmer than the surrounding open land. This daily pattern of cooling and warming means forests experience less temperature variation than nearby cleared areas. The temperature within a mature forest is more stable, with smaller differences between day and night and between seasons. Humidity inside a forest is consistently higher than outside. The transpiring leaves of trees release water vapor continuously, saturating the air with moisture. The reduced wind speed within the forest means this moisture is not carried away as quickly, so it accumulates near the ground. The combination of cooler temperatures and higher humidity creates conditions that many plants and animals depend on for survival. Wind within a forest is dramatically reduced compared to the open landscape. The trunks, branches, and leaves of trees create friction that slows the movement of air. Near the forest floor, wind speed may be less than 10% of the wind speed above the canopy. This sheltering effect creates a quiet, stable environment where leaves and small branches barely move. Only at the tops of the tallest trees does the wind approach the speed found in the open. The reduction in wind has consequences beyond comfort. It affects how heat and moisture are exchanged between the forest and the atmosphere. It influences the dispersal of pollen and seeds. It changes how sounds travel through the forest, and it creates a boundary layer of modified air that sits above the forest, separating the conditions within the forest from the larger weather patterns moving overhead. The vertical structure of the forest creates distinct microclimates at different heights. Near the ground, conditions are coolest, darkest, and most humid. Higher in the understory, more light penetrates and conditions are more variable. In the canopy itself, the trees experience conditions much closer to those of the open air, with full sunlight, higher wind speeds, and greater temperature variation. Clouds that form over forests are not simply the result of large-scale weather patterns. They are often born directly from the moisture that trees release into the atmosphere. The connection between forests and cloud formation is one of the most visible signs of how forests create their own weather. The process begins with transpiration. As trees release water vapor through their leaves, the air above the canopy becomes increasingly humid. When this humid air rises and cools, the water vapor condenses into tiny droplets, forming clouds. In regions with extensive forest cover, these clouds can form on a regular daily schedule, appearing over the forest each morning and dispersing in the evening as the air cools and the transpiration rate drops. The type of clouds that form over forests varies depending on conditions. On warm, humid days, cumulus clouds often develop above the canopy, their flat bases marking the altitude at which rising air has cooled enough for condensation to begin. These clouds can grow into towering structures if conditions are right, eventually producing rain that falls back onto the forest below. Fog is a special kind of cloud that forms at ground level, often within or just above the forest canopy. In coastal forests, fog forms when warm, moist air from the ocean moves over the cooler forest surface. The air cools below its dew point, and water vapor condenses into the suspended droplets that we call fog. Some forests exist in a state of near-permanent fog, receiving much of their water directly from the fog that envelops them. These fog forests, also called cloud forests, are found in mountainous regions where moist air is forced upward by the terrain. As the air rises and cools, it forms a persistent cloud layer that envelops the forest. The trees in these forests are often covered in mosses and lichens that thrive on the constant moisture. The plants themselves contribute to the fog, releasing water vapor that adds to the moisture already in the air. The particles released by forests also play a role in cloud formation. Volatile organic compounds emitted by trees react in the atmosphere to form tiny particles called aerosols. These aerosols serve as cloud condensation nuclei, the surfaces on which water vapor condenses to form cloud droplets. Without these particles, clouds would form only at much higher humidity levels. Forests are essentially seeding the atmosphere with the raw materials needed for cloud formation. The appearance of clouds over forests has been documented by satellite observations. Scientists can see clouds forming regularly over forested areas, while adjacent cleared areas remain cloud-free under the same atmospheric conditions. This difference provides clear evidence that forests are actively creating clouds, not just passively receiving them from larger weather systems. The relationship between forests and clouds creates important feedback loops. More forest cover leads to more transpiration, which leads to more clouds, which can lead to more rainfall, which supports more forest growth. This cycle helps maintain forest ecosystems in regions where rainfall might otherwise be marginal. It also means that deforestation can disrupt cloud formation, creating a drying effect that makes it harder for forests to regenerate. Mist and low clouds in forests also affect the forest microclimate. They reduce the amount of sunlight reaching the canopy, keeping temperatures cooler. They increase humidity, reducing water stress on plants. Forests cool the land in several ways, and the effect is significant enough to influence regional climate. Understanding how forests create cooling helps explain why deforestation often leads to hotter, drier conditions, and why forest restoration is increasingly seen as a strategy for adapting to a warming world. The most direct way forests cool the land is through shade. The canopy of a forest blocks sunlight from reaching the ground, preventing the heating of soil and lower vegetation that occurs in open areas. This shading effect is powerful. On a sunny day, the surface temperature of bare soil can exceed 50 degrees Celsius, while the forest floor beneath a dense canopy remains much cooler. The difference can be more than 20 degrees between shaded forest floor and exposed soil. But shade is only part of the story. Forests also cool the air through evapotranspiration, the combined process of evaporation from soil and transpiration from plants. When water evaporates, it absorbs heat from the surrounding air. This heat energy is used to convert liquid water into water vapor, and it is effectively removed from the local environment. A forest that is actively transpiring is constantly pulling heat out of the air, the same way that sweat cools a human body. The amount of heat removed by evapotranspiration is enormous. A single large tree can have the cooling effect of several room-sized air conditioners running continuously. Multiply that across an entire forest, and the cooling capacity is comparable to that of a large body of water. This evaporative cooling is why forests feel noticeably cooler than surrounding areas, even when you are standing in the shade of a single tree. The albedo effect adds another layer to the cooling story. Albedo is a measure of how much sunlight a surface reflects. Light-colored surfaces, like snow or desert sand, have high albedo, reflecting most of the sunlight that hits them. Dark surfaces, like forest canopies, have low albedo, absorbing most of the sunlight. This means forests actually absorb more solar energy than lighter-colored surfaces, which would seem to work against cooling. However, the cooling from evapotranspiration more than compensates for the additional energy absorbed by the dark forest canopy. The net effect is that forests cool the landscape, especially in tropical and temperate regions. In boreal forests near the Arctic, the picture is more complicated because dark trees absorb heat that would otherwise be reflected by snow, and in these regions, forests can have a net warming effect during winter months. The regional cooling effect of forests has been measured by scientists using satellite data and weather stations. Areas with extensive forest cover show lower surface temperatures than adjacent cleared areas, even when accounting for differences in elevation and climate. Forests breathe. This is not a metaphor. On a daily and seasonal cycle, forests take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen through photosynthesis, and they release carbon dioxide through respiration. This exchange of gases links forests directly to the composition of the atmosphere and to the global climate system in ways that scientists continue to study. During the day, forests are net absorbers of carbon dioxide. Sunlight powers photosynthesis, the process by which trees convert carbon dioxide and water into the sugars they use for growth. The carbon from carbon dioxide becomes part of the tree's wood, leaves, roots, and the organic matter in the soil. A growing forest is a carbon sink, pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing it in biological form. At night, the balance shifts. Without sunlight, photosynthesis stops, but respiration continues. Trees and all the organisms living in the forest soil release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. The net exchange over a full day depends on the age and health of the forest, the time of year, and the local climate. Mature forests can reach a steady state where the carbon they absorb is roughly balanced by the carbon they release. The amount of carbon stored in forests is enormous. Forests hold more carbon than the entire atmosphere. Most of this carbon is not in the living trees, but in the soil beneath them, where decomposing roots and organic matter accumulate over centuries. When a forest is cleared or burned, this stored carbon is released, contributing to the increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide that drives climate change. The breath of the forest extends beyond carbon. Forests release a complex mixture of volatile organic compounds into the atmosphere. These compounds, including terpenes and isoprenes, give forests their characteristic scent. In the atmosphere, they react with other chemicals to form aerosols that affect cloud formation and the reflection of sunlight. The smell of a pine forest on a warm day is actually a chemical signal that the forest is actively shaping the atmosphere around it. These volatile compounds also affect atmospheric chemistry in ways that influence the lifetime of other greenhouse gases. They react with nitrogen oxides to produce ozone, a pollutant at ground level, but a protective layer higher in the atmosphere. The chemistry of forest emissions is complex, and its effects on climate are still being worked out by researchers. The feedback loops between forests and the climate system are powerful and sometimes surprising. Warmer temperatures can increase the rate of photosynthesis, causing forests to absorb more carbon dioxide. But warmer temperatures also increase respiration rates, causing forests to release more carbon dioxide. The net effect depends on which process responds more strongly to warming, and that balance varies from one forest type to another. Drought creates another feedback. When water is scarce, trees close their stomata to reduce water loss. This also reduces their intake of carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, slowing growth. Severe drought can kill trees outright, converting a forest from a carbon sink into a carbon source as dead trees decompose and release their stored carbon. This is one way that climate change can create a self-reinforcing cycle of forest loss. As our story ends, let the quiet ideas settle softly. Your body can continue to relax, breathing slow and steady. If sleep is near, let it arrive naturally. Thank you for spending this moment here on Cozy Sleep Time. Return anytime for another peaceful journey. Good night.